Our hearing, and I will begin the questioning by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. Now, you all are the experts. You're probably wondering why we finally paid attention to this, and it's not just me, but there were others who were interested in this. But I got hooked a few years ago when I read The Perfect Predator. For those at home that may not understand this is a great romance story with a medical mystery wrapped all around it. It's good stuff. Ms. Jezik, for those who don't have time to read the book or figure it out on their own, could you please share with the committee and with those at home what phage therapy is and how it could be an effective tool to combat AMR or be an alternative to antibiotics in those cases where needed?
Absolutely. So we think phage therapy actually has a great deal of progress or a great deal of promise, but there's not enough known about it. So most of the information that we have now about phage comes from reports collected through compassionate use cases. And in many of those cases, phage was actually used in addition to and in concert with antibiotics for infections that were not responding to antibiotics on its own, suggesting that phage therapy has sort of an additive effect. But what clinicians really want are more robust studies to help them understand all the different kinds of indications where we could use phage to help us better understand how phage resistance can develop, because that happens as well, and to help us understand the optimal dosing and duration of phage therapy so that we can really make sure patients get the greatest benefit. It's really an area where more research could yield tremendous benefits.
Well, and in the book that I just referenced, Thomas Patterson's life was saved. His wife was a virologist who had all kinds of medical folks, and they did use a cocktail of antibiotics. In the end, what did it was they found, I think it was a Maryland sewage treatment plant, they found a virus that attacked the shell of the bacteria that was causing all of his health problems, and he was in a coma. And they found a bacteria that cracked the shell, but they still needed the antibiotic to kill the bacteria off. So you're exactly right. So that being said, let me ask you this, because this is one of the problems that we have, and I'm glad the FDA granted them compassionate use in that case, but we're so used to having the clinical trials, but so many of these AMRs are one-offs or very rare. Some of them aren't, as we've heard about the case in Washington, but clinical trials aren't going to work, are they, for a lot of these fixes?
Well, I think we can get more creative with our approaches to clinical trials.
All right.
I think for phage, in addition to clinical trials, simply having one central database where anyone who's using phage in a compassionate use setting or any other setting can report that data, and making sure that we're reporting not only the cases where phage worked, but also the cases where phage didn't work. Because sometimes we learn as much from our failures as we do from our successes. I believe there actually is a clinical trial for phage therapy that is starting to get up and running, so we're hopeful that we will have more information soon. On the antibiotic side, yes, clinical trials are difficult. There are a lot of enrollment challenges, but they are absolutely possible. And in fact, the 21st Century Cures legislation included some provisions to streamline and improve clinical trial processes. It's really the economic challenges that several of us talked about that are the biggest barrier right now for antimicrobial R&D.
And this committee as a whole is very proud of the work we did on 21st Century Cures. Professor Otterson, you've been wanting to jump in on these issues. Jump on in.
I also want to be polite to Amanda Jezik. Carbex supports 3 phage companies. I think it's the most concentrated support anywhere in the world for phage. I would say that they're moving into clinical trials, and it'll be interesting how they interact with the FDA and the agencies to make sure that they're well supported in that endeavor. I would say I know Tom and Stephanie, the authors of this book, well. I would encourage you to maybe to have a hearing in which you just hear from patients, because the stories that they tell and people like them are remarkable.
We're certainly working to maybe have that happen, but this is step one, and obviously there's more than just phage. That's what I'm interested in because of the book, but there's a whole lot of things that each of you all have touched on. Dr. Mathers, did you want to jump in on this? And I apologize, sure. I'm not probably going to have time to get to you, but somebody will.
Very, very quickly, I think with your question about clinical trials, they are really important, but I think the days of, penicillin, finding another penicillin or finding another fluoroquinolone or a, kind of magic bullet, if you will, that antibiotics were coming from the 50s through into the early 80s, and coming to market, those days may not exist. And so we may have to cobble together in a different way than our historic clinical trials to treat antibiotic resistance and to actually get drugs to market.
And it is important, I'll just make this note before I yield back, it is important that we get these things to market quickly, particularly when we don't have anything else that might work. I note that George Orwell died of tuberculosis with probably about 6 to 8 months before antibiotics were available for him to use. Anyway, I yield back.